Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Game Hub. I'm your host, Gamer K, and it is the month of March 2025. We have just begun, and that means new videos are coming out, a couple new ideas, a couple old ideas that I have yet to get to. But right now, we're going into something I started doing in November last year. I've done a lot of top 13s over the last over 5 years of doing the Game Hub. Over 5, maybe. I've done video game topics, anime topics, video game, well, I said video game already, but video game specific lists, and I want to dip my toes into doing something from a show that is near and dear to my family's heart, MASH. A show that has definitely left its mark on the world in very, very good ways. From its amazing, somewhat slapsticky and comical humor to bringing the real truth of war to viewers who never had to experience it. And I love MASH for that. It gives a lot of people a kind of outlook on what happened back then. And I am doing a MASH Season 2, my top 13 episodes. And Season 2 really gave us a lot of new stuff for MASH. Not too much, mind you, like a couple new characters, a couple stuff that to give continuity a little bit to a lot of things that happened at the time. So, yeah, let's get to it. This is Gamer K's Top 13 Season 2 MASH episodes. And why Top 13? Because here, only the odd can be number 1. Starting off this list upright is the ending episode of Season 2, A Smattering of Intelligence. And even though this isn't the episode where he's debuted as this character, we are given our first introduction fully to everyone's favorite counterintelligence officer, Colonel Flag. This guy is the pain in the ass of MASH. Every time he comes around, you know something is going to be really annoying and you're going to hate him one way or the other. Think of, for any of you Canadians out there who love Murdoch Mystery, think of him as Terrence Myers, the government agent that comes in once in a while and always gives us headaches. But this episode's pretty simplistic. Flag crashes a chopper, wounds himself to kind of get a read on the 4077 to combat communism. We get a friend of Trapper's who's also a secret agent who's trying to do the same thing. So it's kind of like an episode of Spy versus Spy if, there wasn't any comical explosions at all with the comic. But yeah, a really interesting way to end off the season with nothing really grand, just introducing us to a character that everyone is going to find very annoying in future seasons. Number 12 on the list, an episode that is not as great as some would think, but it kind of showcases how kind of lonely wartime can make everything. And this episode, Henry in Love. After coming back from R&R, Henry Blake, the colonel of the 4077, who is about as much a leader as Mr. Magoo is at orchestrating a search party. Yeah. Henry comes back with a 20-something-year-old girl that he met who's a correspondent with the war, and it's very awkward. It's very weird, and it kind of showcases that he's been away from his wife for so long, and they don't shy away from showing that some soldiers do end up kind of flinging a lot while in the service a bit. But Henry when he talks about the girl to Hawkeye and Trapper and them, he kind of feels like he's in love, and that's a terrifying thing. And it's so much weirder when she does a cheerleading routine to a song that's on the jukebox. And it really does add the kind of comical, like they're so different, so there's no way it's actual love. And it's even represented more, as in later when she plants one on frickin' Hawkeye. and he feels like he should tell Henry that his latest love is not so much into him. And then, but at the end of the episode, Henry gets a call from his wife and everything, and the emotions start to run past. I mean, they could have done really, really big things with this by making the young girl kind of a gold digger a little bit, like thinking Henry has money because he's a doctor. And they could have played that out a lot. But full disclosure, I'm really glad they didn't go that route. It's something that could have been so stupidly cliche, but they just kind of sweep it under the rug later on, and it's always done well. Number 11 is an episode where really indicates how much, as shown in a lot of shows like NCIS and a lot of other military shows, there are a couple instances when the Army will sweep incidences and repaint them to look like they weren't at fault. Case in point, for the good of the outfit. After a shelling would happen at a small village, and the 4077 had to treat the people there, Hawkeye just brings up disturbing news that the American soldiers were the ones who were responsible for this, and brings someone to showcase this in the newspaper. But it's obvious that it wasn't done properly, and it was the result of enemy artillery. And honestly, like big dum-dums half the time, Trapper and Hawkeye give this guy the entirety of the evidence, from the filings to the medical reports to the shells of shrapnel, and just gives it all to him. And he packs it away. So the whole episode is basically kind of Hawkeye trying to expose what really happened, even though the Army is rebuilding the village. Like Hawkeye says, this is just a payback. Where's their admission of guilt? And I love Hawkeye Pierce as a character because he was drafted, but he doesn't believe in violence. He's a doctor first and a soldier dead last. And even getting a general involved, obviously playing dumb, and basically saying the episode's name, do it for the good of the outfit so that the Army doesn't look bad, obviously. But thankfully, wanting to get a little bit of credit for the work after not wanting to do so before, Frank saved up some medical reports and some shell fragments, and Hawkeye basically uses it as blackmail for the real story. Another great episode that showcases Hawkeye's humanity and disrespect for the Army and the way they act shady half the time. And again, this may be back then, but you know, their tropes like that exist for a reason. The Trial of Henry Blake. This episode takes a little bit of stuff from basically kind of showcasing events that kind of happened like months prior, but stuff that wasn't in actual episodes, such as Radar being a shoe salesman and Klinger trying to fly to Toledo with a giant paraglider. What does all this have to do with what I just said about the title? Houlihan and Burns filed charges against Blake for being an incompetent commander and giving aid to the enemy. Yeah, for the first couple of seasons, these two are real power hungry. So, kind of a short thing to talk about because not a lot happens in this episode. It's basically just the trial section, some of those clip parts from what happened, and Hawkeye and Trapper wanting to save Henry's ass because if Frank Burns is ever left in charge, the guy could burn down a McDonald's with one employee there with his command. Yeah. I'm trying to explain in comical ways of these characters for those of you who don't know about MASH, which I kind of get. And upon near the end of escaping their confinement, they bring proof of what Henry was doing. Turns out that a nurse who came to Korea to help the women and children of the villages, because of Henry's work, so many of their children have lived after giving birth, because according to the statistics, they weren't really surviving back then. But with Henry's help getting them the medicine and the supplies they needed, he wasn't giving aid to the enemy. He was giving aid to a nurse who was helping the locals, so not the enemy soldiers. And the entire episode just has... This episode, to me, has some of Henry Blake's finest moments. When he stands up for himself against the board for what he did, and that he didn't regret it. Henry is always laughed on as one of the most characters that is kind of dumb in the head half the time, but he's still a great character, and this is one of his finest moments. Coming at number 9, we got an episode that is basically an episode that takes place in either just the OR, the colonel's office, and the pre-op. Or no, post-op. Carry On Hawkeye. With Henry, Trapper, and Burns all under the flu and casualties coming in, Hawkeye is left alone being chief surgeon and directing the nurses, also Margaret and Radar, Klinger, and Father Mulcahy, to basically doing what literally is almost impossible. One doctor handling so many different wounded while having the nurses, head nurse, and 2 corporals and the priest help him out. And it's kind of a chaotic moment. It's highly chaotic. And they do incorporate a good amount of humor in most parts of the episode. And it's kind of an episode that kind of gives Hawkeye and Houlihan a little bit of understanding each other, where she's head nurse, but he is the chief surgeon, and even though the way he talks, and like Hawkeye's kind of like me, he's got a lot of jokes, a lot of mannerisms, a little bit of a Luffy personality, but when it comes to the doctor stuff, he's precise and he's precision, and that's something that Margaret sees a lot in this episode, and they kind of get a bit of mutual respect going on. And it's something that continued throughout the show. Even though they butt heads once in a while with army regulations, they still have that kind of mutual respect towards each other in this episode. And it's a really good episode that showcases that. Next up, Mail Call. In a majority of the MASH episodes, there are going to be some episodes where... Oh, no, wait, this isn't that episode. This is something else. Mail Call. After a couple weeks of a whole bunch of mail being backlogged, they finally get mail back, and a couple of good things come out of it. For example, a really good moment with Henry of getting a film from his wife of his daughter's birthday, and some old funny footage of him when they were younger. It's a really cool moment, because nowadays everyone can look up videos on YouTube or on their Facebook or Twitter or whatever they have and relive all those moments. But way back in the 50s, you had to send out for film reels and have a projector to see all those moments. So it's a moment, it's a scene, it's a good section that shows Henry really misses his family and everything, and how stressful the whole thing about war can be. And it's a great moment. Another fun thing is Trapper getting news about his kids growing up and starting to feel left out. And again, another instance of how someone with a family back home is missing the lives of their kids go by them, and they can't get that back. So Trapper tries to go AWOL right near the end after being a little annoyed of the news. At first he's happy about it, but then he realizes he's missing out. And one of the best parts of this is Frank gets stock, announces how much his stock portfolio has grown. So Hawkeye plans to do a little bit of a prank on him by making sure Frank knows what he's done, or making sure Frank goes in on this prank. I'm going to write a letter. Well, how do you know he'll see it? Easy. I'll hide it. Talking about good investment in a thing called Pioneer Aviation, saying that it's going to make a buttload of money. So Frank sends a telegram to his lawyer to put all stock in Pioneer Aviation. And then at the end of the episode, the joke is revealed. There is no Pioneer Aviation. I made it up. Why would you do that? To make you look foolish. In the setup itself. And then we also get a big running gag where Margaret and Frank are obviously fooling around, even though Frank's married. And she kind of pressures him in ways to drop the wife and be with him. And that now that he's got a whole bunch of money, he makes promises and they're blown up in his face. And it just makes me laugh so hard. Oh my God. Such a great episode that has a lot of small elements going into it, but it's a great episode nonetheless. The Sniper, a basic episode that doesn't have a lot of build up with it, but it has a lot of situational comedy, which is really good. A sniper is shooting at the 407th, and they are all under cover from having wounded coming their way to Henry kind of being incompetent to the fullest extent, to Burns trying to act the tough hero, which we all know he isn't, and Hawkeye basically surrendering so that they can get wounded in, but that plan goes right to hell. It's basically kind of a lockdown episode where everyone can't really go anywhere, but there's not a lot of humor in the episode, but there's a lot of good moments that make it good. And again, it's good because it's a situation that would actually happen in a war zone back then. And obviously they would have to wait for people to send their own kind of gunner via chopper, so they would have to wait. Another good thing about this episode is kind of the end a little bit. Like, there's not a lot. Again, it's a great episode because it's a situational episode, and I do love those where kind of like the one where they're all late and friends, where the entire episode is shot within the apartment for a full 30 minutes of the show. Or The Room episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where the entire episode is Peralta and Holt interrogating this guy who they think committed murder, and they're trying to break him. I love episodes that take place in one room, or maybe two rooms if need be. And it's definitely a good episode in terms of that, with not going so far like in different sets. They're able to do a lot with a small theme and workaround, which is something I like. Starting off the middle of this list is LIP, aka LIP, which stands for Local Indigenous Personnel. And this is anytime we get episodes that showcases our characters' morality when it comes to certain topics is always a gold. Throughout this episode, Hawkeye is trying to romance this new nurse that is very interested in him, but he kind of feels like he's working for it, which makes Hawkeye love it even more. And on one of the sides of this, Hawkeye is asked by the X-ray technician to help him out with a couple things. Like, he hooked up with a local girl, and they got married, and they ended up having a kid. And Hawkeye is being asked to help him get the forms ready to to officially marry the local girl and bring her and their son back to the States with him. And this is a good thing because a lot of episodes, there are a couple episodes where a lot of these guys don't give a damn and they just desert. But this is one of the few episodes where it showcases Hawkeye's commitment to basically kind of romance a little bit, like believing that something like this is possible, and that if two people have a kid, they have the right to get married, which it's basic, but he's got to go through a lot of paperwork in this one episode and jump through a lot of hoops to get it done. While at the same time, Houlihan and Burns are sticking their big fat noses in it, trying to make Henry have him cease and desist, but, they can go jump. While at the same time, having to do it with the Army inspector to make sure everything's on the up and up, who kind of looks like Jason Alexander a little bit, I'm not going to lie, to also postponing the date he had with the nurse, having a big complication. So after kind of blackmailing and intoxicating the investigator, Hawkeye gets the permission. And then he goes back to the nurse and kind of explains why he was busy throughout the night. And when he tells her, the nurse is kind of struck that that he stood her up to help an Army guy marry a I refuse to say any form of slurs ever. Like, even if I'm repeating it from a show, I refuse to say it because she basically used a derogatory term for an Asian person. And hearing that, Hawkeye is dumbfounded, and she basically says she doesn't have a problem with them, just not when they marry their people. Yeah. Like I said, not every moment in MASH needs to be hilarious. There are a lot of moments where it can touch up on a lot of racial issues and a lot of prejudice issues. And that's one thing I love about it. And this moment, watching it for the very first time when I was a teenager, got me really thinking, because growing up, I never saw ethnicity or anything like that. I just saw people I went to school with, and that was that. I never thought of anything like that. And the fact that Hawkeye ditches her after hearing her opinions, it's very comical, and it's just a great, good episode in general. And I do love that Hawkeye literally had the chance to be with a gorgeous looking woman, but it just goes to show that sometimes a nice outside can, to quote Hawkeye, have some very unappetizing ideas. So, Lip definitely sets the bar for future episodes that deal with this kind of situation. I swear I did not put this title up here on this bar for comical reasons. It just worked out that way. At number 5 is 5 o'clock Charlie. An enemy North Korean bomber constantly tries to blow up the ammo cache that is that's held near the 407 7th. But the bomber is so incompetent, and he always misses, that the 407 7th make it kind of a gambling game where how far his bomb is to the ammo cache. They make a bet out of it, and it's hilarious, and he always strikes at 5 o'clock, hence the name 5 o'clock Charlie. And it's just so ridiculous to see all these people get together to see this enemy soldier fail miserably, and some of them make money off of it. It's a hilarious episode until Burns tries to get a tank or an air gun. Yeah, an air gun to shoot him down. which is a dumb idea, because if you bring a gun into the mix, then more enemy agents are going to be sent to destroy the MASH. I mean, at least with 5 o'clock Charlie, he couldn't hit water if he fell out of a Titan. Wow, I almost went there. He couldn't hit water if he fell off the Titanic. Oh, I can't believe I said that shit. But overall, the episode is really good. It has a lot of good, again, situation stuff that happens, and we don't see Charlie again. Like, it's a one-off thing until later on. But again, overall, really fun episode, really great. Definitely plays with the humor aspects more. Radar's Report. This episode gets on this list because of how the premise is of Corporal Radar O'Reilly typing up the weekly reports that would have to be sent to I-Corps, just to see what kind of things happen at the 407-7th. But the way he explains it and what we see happen, it's almost like someone giving an abbreviation of a story but leaving out the interesting stuff that happens. So the report looks simple and plain, but what really happened, yeah. Once again, Hawkeye is trying to romance a new nurse. But during OR, an enemy soldier kind of gets away from them and grabs a knife and injures the new nurse, while also damaging one of Corporal Klinger's dresses. And the commotion in OR causes some blood to spill, and one of Trapper's patients is put in jeopardy. And then Hawkeye starts playing doctor with the new nurse after she's recovering, but finding out she has a ring on her finger kind of showcases Hawkeye's inability. Hawkeye will go with a skirt chaser, no question. But when it comes to married women, he doesn't go for that. Which, again, it gives him a lot more credibility to when he's going around with all the other nurses a little bit. But then realizing that she's not married, he gets the go-ahead. But then later starts kind of going a little bit over his head by... Oh, what was I going to say? By kind of going overboard with the romance until she asks to be transferred and stuff like that because he's going way too fast. Houlihan and Burns ask for Corporal Klinger to be discharged for being a disgrace to the Army. And he walks in like this. And Blake asks what's the problem with Klinger. So they bring in psychiatrist Sidney Freeman, who is an amazing addition to the cast, even though he appears like pretty much at least once every single season. Adds a lot of great moments to the show. It's just a funny moment. Like, any of Klinger's antics, no matter how weird they are, get even more ridiculous as the show goes on, and I love it. And then Trapper's patient, the one had difficulties, doesn't make it. So Trapper starts to feel a little enraged over the soldier who caused the issue. That's in the VIP tent getting sickness while under observation. Trapper starts getting very dark thoughts on what to do, but luckily Hawkeye stops him. Yeah, it's a moment that there's a lot of morality issues that happen a lot during the next couple episodes of MASH, and I do love them all. But this is a good instance where Hawkeye stopped Trapper from doing something that he would regret. Overall, at the end of the episode, Blake looks over the report. Basically looks simple. Nothing really, but there's no interesting stuff other than what we see. So it's one of those another kind of situational things where we know what fully happened, but on paper, it doesn't look like anything happened. Number 3 is a very odd choice for me, but it's an episode that kind of showcases anything can be a little bit dull and boring when there's nothing to do. As you were. Going a couple days without any casualties can be a blessing, but at the same time, there's not much you can really do to keep yourself busy while you're in a MASH unit. So everyone starts to kind of lose their mind a little bit. For example, Burns starts lining up all the condiments in the mess hall so that they're all perfectly straight in a line. And funny enough, that little bit was based on an actual soldier that actually did this while in the war because they were so bored. So he just lined up all the condiments and everything. It's so weird how the simplest of things can seem so interesting. Also, later on, Frank's appendix isn't really doing that well. So he kind of requests to ask Trapper and Hawkeye if they would perform the surgery. And when he asks them, they are dressed up in this. Hey, I never said they weren't crazy. So acting obviously apish, although it does have one of the funniest lines in the episode. Take off those costumes. These aren't costumes. We stopped shaving last month. A lot of the humor, again, you got to know what's going on in order to enjoy it. But I'm going over it because it's an older episode. Let me see. Oh, yeah, they also pack Frank into an army crate. Yeah, it's kind of a boring episode a little bit, but it's the boringness of the episode that make me love it so much, because it showcases not everything's going to be an exciting day, and I do love that. What makes me kind of love this kind of boring-ish episode is, again, it showcases that there are moments where it's not going to be as super exciting, and after the exciting stuff happens, like blood shortage, pregnant woman giving birth, shelling, and operating on Frank's hernia, not appendix. See, this is why I gotta do my research earlier on and rewatch the seasons I'm talking about. I'll remember that. I'm still doing these kinds of things by hand, by ear. So, yeah. Somewhat simplistic episode, but it's the simplicity of the episode that gets it into the number 3 spot. Dear Dad 3. This is a kind of episode that started off with Hawkeye writing to his father about all the antics that happened in the 4077, and this is a kind of topic that will continue throughout the series with each individual, certain characters giving telling people back home or whatever about situations that have been happening. The only characters to not get episodes like this are Henry Blake, Frank Burns, and Margaret Houlihan. They are the only ones who don't do and Trapper. So yeah, everyone else gets an episode that kind of sends to home some of the weird things that happen. And this is one of my favorite episodes, because of what goes on in said episode. For example, during the OR, a soldier has a grenade that was shot into his body. So that's an intense moment, but it's done right near the beginning, so you don't feel the overall tension of it. Okay, I may have made a mistake earlier with the mail call episode, as in what I said about the film that Henry's wife sent him. That happens in this episode. I mixed up 2 episodes by accident, so forgive me. I'm still trying to do these types of videos the way I want to do them. So if I forget little bits of information, I apologize. But no reviewer is perfect. So we get that segment of the guys watching the home video. And another thing I love about this episode where after doing surgery on a sergeant who asks Hawkeye to make sure he gets the right colored blood. Yeah. Sadly, it's a terrible thing back in the day that a lot of prejudices like that happen, and from maybe still can happen now. But the way Hawkeye and Trapper deal with this kind of prejudiced character is not so much in terms of violence as it is with creativity, as they paint the guy darker and make the guy think that he got the wrong blood. Yes, I know it sounds bad, but there's a point to it. After one of the nurses who is of color, Nurse Ginger, great character in the earlier seasons, but kind of died down as the series went on and wasn't given so much spotlight. But moments that she did was great. Odessa Cleveland, fantastic actress. The guy kind of talks back, but she kind of says, like, that you're a sergeant, I'm a higher rank, so show her the respect. And later near the end of the episode, and even Klinger making snide comments to this guy about the wrong blood, he kind of loses it on Trapper and Hawkeye that they gave him the wrong blood, but they say all blood is the same. And Hawkeye and this is an actual true story, but the way they went about it by fudging up a little bit of information really hammers the point home to what this whole thing is. So basically the whole thing, Hawkeye basically tells him, have you ever heard of Dr. Charles Drew? And obviously the sergeant. And again, during this show, the story of MASH takes place between 1950 to 1953, but it's not really consistent throughout 11 years of the 50, 51, 52, 53 years of the war before the Korean War ended. So it kind of goes all over the place with timeline-wise, but it's not a big issue. So back in the day, Dr. Charles Drew was a doctor who was responsible for discovering the process of separating blood to be stored. So basically plasma that the doctors used to save patients. And this shocked the sergeant. And the sad thing is that a while ago, like in the continuity of when this episode took place, he died. He died in a car accident from blood loss. He bled out to death because the hospital wouldn't let him in. It was for whites only. So upon hearing that, the sergeant kind of gives this kind of look to them that, because so there is no actual evidence that what happened to Dr. Drew was a result of prejudice by the hospital, but he did bleed out in a car accident. So one thing I really love is that they added that bit in there to really hammer the point home to this racist sergeant, basically saying the guy responsible for the reason you're alive bled out because the hospital wouldn't let him in. So again, there's no real evidence to support this claim, but it's not the point that it's truthful. It's the point that to kind of showcase that the guy responsible for saving your life ended up dying because of prejudice. And it gave the sergeant a lot to think about. And even at the end of the episode, he goes to the happy hour at the swamp, which is Hawkeye and Trapper's tent, and he's being shipped out. So he thanks Hawkeye for saving his life and for giving him a lot to think about. And even doing so to give a proper salute to Nurse Ginger and she gives him a good luck afterwards. And it's episodes like this that really make me love MASH so much. When they can hammer a good point home and kind of change someone's mind about something, especially in terms of prejudice. I just kind of wish that it was easy to change that kind of thing. I wish it was easier. But yeah, it's a great episode with a lot going on in it. But number one is something that does it in spades. Ironic that I said that. Topping off the list of MASH Season 2, Deal Me Out. This episode takes place in a single night, which again, like I said, situational episodes I really, really love. Hawkeye, Trapper, Klinger, and Blake have invited Sidney Freeman, the psychiatrist, and another I don't know if he's a captain or a colonel or whatever, but we get the esteemed honor of having an alumni of one of my favorite movies, the legend Pat Morita, being in MASH for a good number of episodes. For the what is it? Damn it. Sorry, camera died. Had to pause it. Had to stop it. So, yeah. Basically, they're getting together for their medical conference, aka poker night. And a lot of funny aspects happen during this whole one night. Radar accidentally hits a local person and needs Blake's help trying to fix it. The best parts of the episode are definitely during the poker game. Hawkeye being called constantly, Blake being called constantly, Sidney Freeman, and again, Pat Morita just adds so much added humor to the entirety of this small episode. It's beautiful. Burns can't operate on a CID man, counterintelligence officer, because he's in surgery, but they can't anesthetize him unless there's another one. But he calls one, and that's when we get our first glimpse of Colonel Flagg in before his out-of-control curiosity behavior. Where Hawkeye criticizes Frank for being a chicken to operate, and him and Trapper go and do it anyway, despite Frank's warnings. While Frank also deals with a patient in pre-op and post-op who doesn't want to go back to the front and is a little scared. And Frank, being his usual self, acts like a jack. So overall, this entire episode is great. And also, after Frank pushes the guy too far, the patient grabs a gun and holds him up in the shower. And even though he's gone crazy and giving one of the best lines in the episode, Hawkeye tells Sidney, "You're up." Sydney, you're up. I'm not going out there without a bulletproof couch. I just love it. Okay, again, outside of the main cast, Sidney Freeman, I can't remember the actor's name. Every time he's in an episode, it's either heartbreaking, emotional, or absolute genius level of comedy with his criticisms, with his psychology background. It's absolutely hilarious, and every moment of the episode has those moments, from the poker game to Radar's little incident with a hit and run, with Burns being a coward and Flag coming in and again having a lot of good moments, to Burns and the patient, to the poker game itself. A lot of funny moments are within the poker game. It's just moments that just combine into like a good episode. And the fact that it takes place within a single time frame, like one night, the poker game, it just makes everything better. And it just showcases how great certain episodes can be with a little bit of setup and not so much heavy stuff coming onto it. And I do love, again, that is why Deal Me Out is my favorite MASH episode of season 2. And again, all these episodes are great. So it's so hard coming up with these lists to kind of dissect these episodes and what makes them so good. But I'm not a surgeon, so I'll leave the dissecting to the MASH. And that's it for this week, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe down below. Join me next week, where I go into a new Funko review of a very old Funko, where we'll raise the volume of this hi-fi character. This is Gamer K, logging out.